So there was a newspaper article about this bird called Chippy, Chippy the parakeet. It was the owner was what does it matter who she was? She owned the bird, and she used to say, the bird was loved to sing in his cage. It was always so cheerful and happy. And one day the owner decided that Chippy's bird cage was a bit dirty and needed a bit of a clean. So she took the vacuum cleaner hose and took off the attachment and put it at into the cage so that it would suck up suck up all the rubbish and things like that. And then as she was doing that, she got a phone call. So she turned around to answer the phone, and then all of a sudden, shoop, she heard a sound, and she looked back, and Chippy was nowhere to be found. She quickly hung up the phone and took the vacuum. It was one of those vacuums with the dust bag, and she got into the dust bag and found Chippy, and he was alive, but he was all dirty and dusty. And so she thought, I need to clean him. So she rushed him to the tap and washed him in the cold water, and she got rid of all the dirt. But then she noticed that the bird was now shivering and cold. She was like, oh no. So she got her hairdryer, and she turned on the hairdryer to warm up Chippy, and it was blasting him with hot air. And of course, after all this, the bird was traumatized. And the reporter who wrote the article a couple of days later contacted the owner, and they said, how's Chippy doing now, a couple of days since the incident? And so he said, well, he doesn't sing much anymore, he just sits and stares, right? And it's not hard to see why. Many of us can relate to Chippy's traumatic story, yes? 1 minute you're in a familiar area, familiar territory, maybe your home or workplace or something, and then all of a sudden you get a call, the doctor, something's wrong with you, you've got this or that. Maybe your payment to your power bill or something bounces and they say it's declined. Maybe, you applied for a job or for a school or something, and all you get back is a rejection letter. Maybe, you wake up in the middle of the night and there's a knock at your door and it's a policeman giving you bad news. Shoom! Just like that, your life that had been so calm is now stormy. Have you ever found yourself in a storm like that, a storm in your life? A circumstances where you were completely unprepared, I like to be prepared for a lot of things. So that I don't like to be in those situations, where the storm comes and I'm not ready. But you can never be prepared for everything. There's always something that's going to happen. And sometimes, we can feel forgotten by God, yes? Sometimes, you know God, you know your relationship with Him, you know your interactions, how God has led in the past. You have sensed His presence, experienced His grace, but in those moments it seems it's like you can't hear Him, you can't feel Him. It seems as He has forgotten you. Have you ever felt like God was avoiding you? That's different than being forgotten, actively trying to, when you see someone in the shop and the person, but when you look at them, they just turn around and try and go down the next aisle. That's me sometimes. Or maybe it's just you have needs, and when you pray to God, but it doesn't seem like He's responding to your needs. It seems like He's indifferent to your pain. It seems like life has gone from being a joy to being a struggle. Ooh. You've been trying to be faithful, but it seems that at every turn you are opposed. Your efforts are thwarted. Your contributions are marginalized. Maybe your heart is broken, and life just seems to get harder. Your relationships seem to be more and more difficult. Struggle and suffering have filled your life. If so, I want to invite you to join me this morning in listening to someone who's experiencing something similar. This man we're going to listen to, he knows how you feel. More importantly, God knows how you feel. In fact, it was God that inspired the person that we're going to listen to this morning to record his emotions and his experiences and to preserve his emotions and experiences so that we might encounter the same God that he knew, so that we might find hope and comfort and guidance. Can you guess who we're going to turn to this morning? Oh, no. Just after that, we're going to Psalms. Yes, David. David knew pain and suffering. David knew, exactly. Well, we'll see. We'll look at it now. But you can turn to Psalms 13. Psalms chapter 13. It's very short. It's only 6 verses. But in it, there's a lot to unpack. And today we're going to do kind of like how we do in Bible studies, just go through what we can see in these verses and how they can help us and guide us in our walk. If you're there, you can follow along. I'll read it for us here. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemy say, I have prevailed against him. Let those who trouble me rejoice when I am moved. Lest those who trouble me rejoice when I am moved. But I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me. It's a journey, yes. It's a wonderful journey that we see David go on. A journey that has 3 stages. In the first part, we see his questions. In the second part, the requests. And then finally, a declaration. So let's look at this first stage, the first couple verses. At the very outset of the psalm, we get a glimpse of his suffering soul. But it's not a silent soul, right? Verse 1 says, how long, O Lord? 4 times in 2 verses we hear this plea. How long? How long? How long? How long? Have you ever uttered those words? Maybe you're not out loud, but in your mind you're like, how long do I have to do this? These are the words of a man on the verge of despair. His suffering seems endless. How long? David is weary. He is pressing his pain and anguish to his God. See when in the midst of his suffering, David is calling out to God. The very one who promised to be with his people always, right? This is an act of faith. It is turning to the one who promised to help his people. He is the only one who can help. As he turns to God, he pours his deepest thoughts, his deepest anguish, his deepest questions. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? The first question his suffering causes is this: has God forgotten me? Does he not remember who I am? Have you ever felt that way? That when you've walked with God, you've known God, you've experienced fellowship with God, you have observed the fruits of God in your life that can only be attributed to God. You know God. This is your God. But something happens and it feels like your relationship changes. You feel forgotten. Have you forgotten me, God? Do you remember who I am? Are you aware of what I'm going through right now, Lord? Do you know what I'm experiencing right now? Do you know how bad it hurts? The feeling intensifies. How long will you hide your face from me? It's not just that God has forgotten him now. Now it's that God is avoiding him, hiding from him. At first he was overlooking me, and now he has turned away from me. David has lost all sense of God's presence and God's blessing. He had known God's presence, and now he is mainly aware of God's absence. And we see the emotional effects of this experience in verse 2. How long must I take counsel in my soul? What does it mean? One translation puts it, how much must I wrestle with my thoughts? How long will I worry about what is going on with me? How long, Lord, do I have to deal with this? And continuing, and have sorrow in my heart all day. a sorrowful, downcast heart. To make the picture complete, to make the suffering complete, it's not just God turning away. It's not just inner turmoil, it is also outward. How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Something is opposing David. Some adversity, something threatens to conquer him. He is on the verge of being overwhelmed. David is left with how long? Do you feel that? The anguish that he is suffering? How long? Maybe you feel like that now. You are not alone. You're not alone. Let us derive faith and comfort knowing that David himself experiences God's absence. This is from the same man who was lying in the field under the stars, who later on penned, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." The same man writes now here, "How long will you hide your face from me?" How long? Forever? Have you ever had that kind of experience, like a circumstance where you were completely unprepared, your safe, secure world was broken apart? This cry should also encourage us. God knows how you feel. Through this text, we have an invitation to come to him, to pour out to him, to cast your cares upon him. It's an invitation. This psalm is meant to help give us a voice to our anguish and our cries and our pain to God. David is not avoiding the subject. He's not alone in some corner. He comes out to God and says, "Here it is. Here is my pain. Here's what I'm dealing with. Help." So often our tendency in suffering is we isolate ourselves. We spend our energy reviewing and rethinking and mulling over and regretting and worrying and anticipating and marshalling resources and wondering and scheming and fretting, and as if there is some comfort and relief in rehearsing our suffering over and over. That kind of introspection is understandable, but it is also a form of self-sufficiency. It can be an expression of pride. I dealt with it. I mulled it over and I overcame it myself. We're trying to understand, we're trying to resolve, we're trying to deliver ourselves instead of humbling ourselves and crying out to God. God gives grace to the humble. He opposes the proud-hearted. David is very humble here. He's very, vulnerable, right? He's exposing himself. "Lord, how long?" Let us follow the example of the psalmist, that even when it's painful, even when it seems that there are no words, nothing left to say, talk to God. The second part of the chapter deals with the questions that he has. In verse 3, we move to the second part of his journey. His question has brought him to a crossroad. He's crying, "How long have you forgotten? Have you hidden? What's going to happen?" Will he despair? Will he give up? Will he allow his adversary or whatever is tormenting him to overcome him? Will he turn his back? He looks to God for help in the form of some specific requests here. It begins, "Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death." 3 specific requests. The first request is what? What's the first word? Consider. Yes. What does that word mean? Look at me. Yes? Give me your attention. Consider me. David doesn't just want God to notice him. He doesn't just want eye contact. He wants the look of God. Biblically, God's look is his personal regard, his gracious attention. The look of God is the favor of God. David wants God's presence. Shine your face upon me. When David calls for God to consider or look upon him, he is asking for more than just mere acknowledgement. He is longing for the intimate relational gaze of God that brings comfort and healing and a sense of divine closeness. It is a request for God's nearness, as his gaze is not just passive, but filled with love, favor, and transformative power. The look of God specifies a special connection, a moment where God's love is deeply felt and his presence is made manifest, providing strength and peace even in times of suffering. The second request we have there is answer. Consider and answer me. Act on my behalf. This is a cry for God to respond with action, not just with words. It signifies a deep longing for God to intervene in a way that is tangible, impactful. David's plea is not merely for God to acknowledge his distress, but to actively engage with him, to move on his behalf, to bring resolution to his suffering. Answer me reflects a desire for God's direction, healing, and provision, especially when one feels isolated or overwhelmed. Consider me and hear me. Answer. And thirdly, we have light up my eyes. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. We're looking at a physical healing and as well as a spiritual, right? A spiritual illumination is being asked for here. God, shine your face on me. What is David asking for? He desires to be near God. He wants to be aware once again of God's presence. He wants to experience richness, fellowship with God, and all of the blessings that come when we encounter him. Then we come to the final part of his journey. David ends the psalm with the third stage declarations. He declares, but I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. He is calling upon God's grace and mercy. David knows, and you can know too. You can be certain God will answer, yes? Despite all the observable evidence and contrary to his human feelings, the psalmist finds security and confidence in God. He laid hold again of God. He knew the God he loved. By the grace of God, he transferred his focus. He transferred his preoccupation from the twists and turns and instabilities of life, of whatever trial he was experiencing, to what? To the character and promises of God, yes? He remembered who God was. What did he remember? Well, first of all, he remembered God's unfailing love. But I have trusted in your mercy. Other versions say, but I have trusted in your steadfast love. It is one of the richest and most beautiful words in the whole of the Old Testament. This is the love by which God freely commits himself to someone. It is God's covenant love, a kind of love that is freely given, no obligation, mercifully offered. And it's usually given from one in power to one in need. A love that expresses a commitment to that relationship that won't stop. It's God's loyal love. David remembered this. God is loyal to me. He has bound himself to me, and he's not letting go. That's the kind of God that we serve. And David remembered who God was. This is not the divine watchmaker who sets the world in motion and then withdraws himself to a remote location somewhere in the universe. He's not a God that is, not interested in this world. He just created us and then left us to be, and every now and then he'll come in and say, no, yeah, no. This is a God whose uncontested reign towers over the universe, who carries all things by the word of his power. Be it a sparrow in the air or the hairs on your head, God upholds it all. In his infinite wisdom, he's working all things throughout the universe and all, billions and billions of people on the earth. He's working for it all to accomplish unfathomable good, wise purposes for his glory. He's a God who, for no other reason than mercy and grace, chose you. God chose you and set his affection on you. He brought you kicking and screaming to himself and bound you to him. He is working in your life with all the energy of omnipotence, to accomplish your ultimate good and to bring you to your destiny of being conformed to the image of his perfect Son. That is who God is. And David remembers. God wants us to remember. David had lost his grasp on it, but he's got it again. He'd lost sight of it, but he sees once more. What do you do with that kind of God? When you get that relationship, that experience, what do? Well, you worship. You trust. I have trusted in your mercy. You rest, you fall at his feet, you lay aside all doubts, accusations, uncertainties, anxieties, unknown outcomes, and dire consequences, and you just put it to the side. You say, Lord, I am trusting in your mercifully, freely given, undeserving, the not let me go kind of love. That is what I'm trusting in. I don't know what's going to happen. My circumstances may not change. The pain may not go away. The grief may linger. But you've got something. You've got someone who will meet you in that suffering, who will sustain you through the suffering. He will use every second of that suffering for your ultimate good. Every second, no waste, for his ultimate glory. What else did he remember? He remembered God's salvation. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. David remembered God's character, and now he remembers God's promise. God's promise to deliver his people. His promise is to save his people. His promise to rescue his people. Now, the chapter's only 6 verses. This is only, verse 5. Just 4 verses previously, David is going through it, right? Has anything changed in the situation? Probably no. It was just, you go back one verse, he's still in the same situation. David's circumstances haven't changed to being an objective observer looking at the situation. Nothing has happened, but on the inside, everything has changed. David has turned his gaze above his suffering. Do you know what he saw? He saw arching over the vistas of his suffering. He saw arching over his entire life God's promise to deliver and to bring him into the fullness of life that comes with the fellowship of God. To forgive his sins, to bring him near, to bless him, to fulfill the purpose for which he was created. Worship and fellowship with God face to face. We tend to dwell on our suffering, and to say it as, and put it as tenderly and as nicely as possible to people who are suffering, we can't always understand or relate to the different suffering that people experience, yes? But we tend to think of our suffering as the most serious possible condition that we could ever experience, that could ever occur. But in the bigger picture, there is something that greatly exceeds the seriousness of your suffering, yes? And that's our sin. Standing guilty of sin and rebellion and arrogance before a holy God who deserves and demands our allegiance and who must, in the integrity of his holiness, judge all wickedness in his moral universe, to be in that situation is far more serious than any temporal suffering that we could imagine. And that is the predicament that God remedied when he sent his one and only Son to hang on a cross and to take in his own person all the penalty of sin, of every sin that would ever be forgiven, in order to save, to rescue, and to deliver every person who would ever be saved. So that rebellious sinners could experience the loving gaze of God, the fullness of life in his presence forever. So let us allow this to put our suffering in perspective. Let us not only bring our suffering to a compassionate God, but let us also become freshly aware, more aware of the gracious, undeserved salvation that God has provided in Jesus Christ. And we finally come to the last verse, David's meditation. He turns to praise, right? He's going through it, But then he says, I will trust God, and then he praises the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me. Now the word there, has, right? It's past tense. He has dealt bountifully with me. David's talking as if it has already occurred, as if God has already brought him through and has blessed him for what is to take place. This isn't positive thinking. It's not mind games. It's not, I'm not really hurting, I'm not really suffering. No, he's not denying the hardship he's experienced, but it is an expression of certainty. Certainty that when he looks back at this trial, when he looks back at the suffering of his life, he is only going to have praise to give to God, yes? We're going to sing the song after this, but it's the glory song. Just wanted to read the first verse for you all. When all my labors and trials are o'er, and I am safe on that beautiful shore, just to be near the dear Lord I adore, will through the ages be glory for me. And we kind of talked about it in Bible study this week, right? Paul and Barnabas, they went to I can't remember what city, but Paul was stoned, right? And they left him for dead. They thought he was dead. And the disciples gathered around him. He got up, and then he went back to do the work of God. He went back to preaching and ministering, right? He didn't dwell on the suffering, what he experienced. I'm sure he was they thought he was dead, right?
He was probably a bloody mess.
Yeah. But he got up and went back. His glory was in God. To see his smiling face, right? When that time comes, at that point there will be no uncertainty. There will be no confusion, no perplexity of the soul. There will be no anguish. There will be no questions. There will be no how longs. He's convinced that when he gets to that point, when he looks back, he will sing a full-throated song. He has dealt bountifully with me. And our song doesn't need to be any different. You may be suffering unspeakable pain, but there's going to be a day, God promises you, there's going to be a day, if only I knew. He has dealt bountifully with me, yes? We have even more reason to be certain than David did. These words don't only give voice to David's heart, but there was another person who felt these things, right? A descendant of David even. His name was Jesus. He cried a very similar cry, quoting from Psalms. My God, why have you forsaken me? Here's the difference. His suffering didn't take him by surprise. His suffering was completely undeserved. And unlike us, God really forsook him because he took upon himself our sin. He forsook him so that we would not be forsaken. He hid his face from Jesus so that he could shine his face upon us. Jesus knows how you feel. He went before us so that we might never ever be separated from the love of God, which is found in Jesus. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, like your prayers are unheard, or that God is distant or far from you, I want you to know that you're not alone. We find it here in Psalm 13, an expression of what many of our experiences are like. The weight of suffering, the silence of God, the fear that we are alone. But David doesn't stay in that place. He brings his doubts, his pain, his confusion, his suffering, and he brings it to God, and he cries out honestly, just as you and I do sometimes. And then he remembers who God is, that he is faithful, that he is loving, that he is ever present, even when we can't feel it. David moves from frustration to trust, and that is where we are invited to go as well. It may be hard, especially when life feels heavy, but in those moments of struggle, remember that God hasn't forgotten you. His love for you has not changed. He promises to be with you, even in the darkest times. He's working in your life in ways that you might not see, and you might not fully understand. But even when life feels uncertain, you can rest in his salvation. God has dealt bountifully with you. His grace is more than enough for whatever you are facing. No matter how long it might last, you are not forgotten. He is right there with you, and he will bring you through this. Take comfort. Come to him and enjoy the same trust that David found. Trust in God's unfailing love. You don't have to understand everything right now, and you won't. But God is good, and he is working everything for your good, even now and for all eternity. I will sing to the Lord, right? Because he has dealt bountifully with me.